The quantum fold drive hummed like a sleeping beast as the UES Dakota dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge watching the stars settle into their normal patterns through the main view screen. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he barely noticed. Today was the day that would change everything for humanity. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy signatures ahead," reported Navigator Kelly Brooks from her station. Her voice carried the excitement that everyone on the bridge felt but tried to hide. "It looks like an entire fleet of ships." Jake nodded and set his cup down on the arm of his captain's chair. After 3 years of traveling through empty space, finding signs of alien life felt like a dream. "Put it on screen." The view screen flickered and showed a sight that made everyone on the bridge hold their breath. Dozens of sleek silver ships hung in space like deadly sharks. Each one was 3 times the size of the Dakota, with hull designs that looked both beautiful and threatening. Strange symbols glowed along their sides in patterns that hurt to look at for too long. "They're scanning us," announced Chief Communications Officer Ryan Palmer. "Wait, they're sending a message, audio only." A voice filled the bridge, speaking in perfect English but with an accent that sounded like grinding metal. "Small vessel, you have entered the territory of the Zalani Empire. State your purpose or be destroyed." Jake straightened his uniform and cleared his throat. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Dakota. We come in peace, seeking to establish diplomatic relations with your people." A long silence followed. Then the alien voice returned, and this time it sounded amused. "Peace? How refreshing. We are always interested in meeting new species. You will dock with our command ship. Come alone and bring no weapons." Lisa Parker, the ship's head diplomat, stepped forward. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes, but Jake knew she had nerves of steel. "Captain, I should lead the diplomatic team. It's what I'm trained for." "Absolutely not," Jake replied. "If this goes wrong, I won't lose my best diplomat." "On first contact," Lisa smiled. "With respect, sir, if this goes wrong, we're all dead anyway. At least let me do my job." Jake looked around the bridge. His crew stared back at him with faces full of hope and fear. They had traveled so far to find other intelligent life, and now they had found it. He couldn't let fear stop them from taking the next step. "Fine," he said, "but you take a full security team." "Actually, sir," Lisa said, "I think a smaller group would be better, less threatening. Just me, Danny Rodriguez from engineering, and maybe Pete Johnson from security." Danny Rodriguez was the kind of man who could fix anything with spare parts and determination. Pete Johnson was former military, calm under pressure, and had volunteered for this mission specifically because he wanted to meet aliens. Jake thought about it for a moment and then nodded. "Do it. But stay in constant contact. At the first sign of trouble, you get out of there." An hour later, Lisa found herself walking through the corridors of the largest alien ship she had ever imagined. The walls were covered in the same strange symbols they had seen on the hull, and the air tasted like copper and ozone. Danny walked beside her, his engineering scanner recording everything. Pete brought up the rear, his hand resting casually, near his sidearm. The Zalani who escorted them were tall, thin creatures with gray skin and forearms. Their faces looked almost human, but their eyes were solid black and seemed to see everything at once. They wore armor that looked like it was grown rather than made, with organic curves that shifted color as they moved. "I have to admit," Danny whispered, "this is not what I expected aliens to look like." "Quiet," Lisa whispered back. "We don't know if they can hear us." They were led into a vast chamber with a ceiling so high it disappeared into shadows. In the center of the room sat a group of Zalani on chairs that looked more like thrones. The largest of them, wearing armor that pulsed with red light, stood as they approached. "I am Commander Vextar of the Zalani Empire," the alien said in that grinding voice. "You are the representatives of this human species?" "Yes," Lisa replied, stepping forward. "I am Lisa Parker, diplomatic representative of the United Earth government. These are my colleagues, Danny Rodriguez and Pete Johnson." Vextar looked them up and down with those black eyes. "You are smaller than we expected," he said. And you look very fragile. Are you certain you are the dominant species of your world? Lisa felt a chill run down her spine, but she kept her voice steady. Appearances can be deceiving, Commander. We may look fragile, but humans are quite resilient. The Zilani around Vextar made sounds that might have been laughter. Resilient? Vextar said. We shall see. It is our custom to test new species, to see if they are worthy of joining our empire as equals, or if they should serve as subjects. Test us how? Pete asked, his soldier instincts making him tense. Nothing too severe, Vextar replied. Simply a demonstration of your ability to survive in conditions that separate the strong from the weak. Before any of the humans could object, the chamber began to change. The air grew thick and heavy, like trying to breathe underwater. Lisa felt pressure building in her ears and chest, as if she was deep underground. The temperature began to rise, then suddenly dropped to freezing, then rose again. Danny's scanner started beeping frantically. The atmospheric pressure just increased by 300%, he said through gritted teeth. And the temperature is swinging, between 120 degrees and -40. Lisa felt like someone was squeezing her entire body in a giant fist. Her lungs burned as she tried to get enough air. Beside her, Pete was sweating and shivering at the same time, but he remained standing. Danny looked uncomfortable but was still checking his instruments. The Zilani watched them with growing confusion. These conditions should have killed most species within seconds, yet the humans were still conscious and talking. Interesting, Vextar said. Most species collapse immediately. Perhaps you are not as fragile as you appear. Lisa managed to speak despite the crushing pressure. We told you appearances can be deceiving. Is this test over? The confusion on Vextar's face was clear even to humans who had never seen alien expressions before. This was supposed to be a mild test, barely enough to cause discomfort to a Zilani child. Yet these small, soft-looking creatures were enduring it as if it was merely unpleasant weather. Yes, Vextar said slowly. The test is over. The chamber returned to normal conditions, and the humans immediately looked more comfortable. We will need to conduct more thorough evaluations. Lisa nodded, though she felt a growing sense of unease. Something in the commander's voice suggested that these evaluations might be far more dangerous than what they had just experienced. As they were escorted back to their shuttle, Danny leaned over to Pete. I think we might have just made things worse instead of better. Pete nodded grimly. Yeah, I'm getting that feeling too. 3 days had passed since the first meeting with the Zilani Empire. Dr. Amy Collins sat in her laboratory aboard the Dakota, studying the readings from Lisa Parker's diplomatic mission. The data made no sense according to everything she knew about alien biology. The atmospheric pressure readings show they tried to crush our people, she said to her research partner, Dr. Kevin Walsh. But Lisa's team acted like it was just bad weather. Kevin looked up from his own data pad. Maybe that's exactly what it was to them. Remember, these people come from Earth. We've survived ice ages, plagues, and natural disasters that would wipe out most species. Before Amy could respond, the ship's communication system crackled to life. Dr. Collins to the bridge immediately, came Captain Morrison's voice. Amy found the bridge buzzing with activity. Lisa Parker stood next to the captain, looking tired, but determined. Doctor, Jake said, the Zilani have made an unusual request. They want to invite a human research team to their homeworld for what they call a cultural and scientific exchange. That sounds promising, Amy replied, though something in Lisa's expression made her cautious. Lisa shook her head. I don't think it's what they're calling it. During our meeting, I got the impression they think we're lying about being a natural species. They keep talking about proper testing and evaluation. What kind of testing? Amy asked. The kind that's designed to prove we're not what we claim to be, Pete Johnson said from his position near the tactical station. I've seen that look before. They think we're some kind of weapon or engineered species. Captain Morrison crossed his arms. The question is, do we accept their invitation? It could be a trap, but it might also be our only chance to prove we're peaceful. Amy thought about it for a moment. She had spent her entire career studying extreme environments and how life adapted to survive in impossible conditions. If the Zilani wanted to test human limits, she was probably the best person to handle it. "I'll go," she said. "But I want to bring Pete Johnson for security and Sam Davis from engineering. If they're planning to test our technology as well as our biology, Sam's the best we have." 6 hours later, Amy found herself standing on the surface of the Zilani homeworld. The gravity was twice what she was used to, making every step feel like she was carrying a heavy backpack. The air burned her lungs with each breath, filled with chemicals that would be toxic to most Earth life. The sky was a sickly yellow color, and 2 suns beat down with radiation that made her skin tingle. "Welcome to Zarthek," said High Researcher Kethvar, the Zilani scientist who had requested this meeting. He was taller than the military Zilani they had met before, with skin that looked like polished stone. "I hope you find our world educational." Sam Davis was already scanning the environment with his instruments. The former Navy engineer had volunteered for this mission because he loved solving impossible problems. "Fascinating atmospheric composition," he said, apparently unbothered by the harsh conditions. "The chemical balance should be lethal to carbon-based life." Pete Johnson stood nearby, his military training helping him adapt to the heavy gravity. Sweat ran down his face, but he remained alert and ready. "How long do your people usually survive?" "In conditions like this?" he asked. Kethvar looked confused. "These are normal conditions for our homeworld, but for most species we have encountered, exposure of more than a few minutes results in death." Amy was taking notes on a pad that kept trying to overheat in the intense radiation. "How long have we been here now?" 23 minutes, Sam replied, checking his chronometer. The confusion on Kethvar's face deepened. He led them to a research facility built into the side of a mountain. The building looked like it had been carved from solid rock, with walls thick enough to withstand massive explosions. "We have prepared a series of evaluations," Kethvar explained as they walked through corridors that pulsed with strange energy. "These tests will help us understand the true nature of your species." The first test chamber looked like a torture device designed by someone with too much imagination. Strange machines lined the walls, all of them humming with dangerous energy. In the center of the room was a chair that looked more like an electric chair than anything meant for scientific research. "This chamber will expose you to levels of radiation that we use to sterilize our medical equipment," Kethvar explained to Amy. "Most organic matter breaks down within seconds." Amy looked at the chair and shrugged. "How long do you need me to sit there?" "You misunderstand," Kethvar said. "This is not a request. This is a test of survival. You will remain in the chamber until the radiation kills you, or until you admit that your species is artificially enhanced." Amy sat down in the chair without hesitation. "Then I guess we'll be here for a while. I hope you brought snacks." The radiation began immediately. Amy could feel it like heat on her skin, but it was no worse than spending a day at the beach without sunscreen. She had worked in research facilities with similar radiation levels during her graduate studies. "The readings show lethal levels of exposure," one of Kethvar's assistants reported. "She should be dead." "Maybe your instruments are broken," Amy suggested helpfully. She was actually finding the warmth comfortable after the cold of space travel. The test continued for 2 hours. Amy spent the time mentally reviewing her research notes and occasionally asking questions about Zilani science. When they finally turned off the radiation, she stood up and stretched. "That was nice and warm," she said. "What's next?" Kethvar was staring at his instruments like they had personally betrayed him. "The gravity chamber," he said weakly. The gravity chamber was exactly what it sounded like. Sam Davis volunteered for this test, claiming that he had always wondered what it would be like to experience the gravity of a gas giant. The machine began to increase the gravitational force slowly. At 3 times Earth gravity, most Zilani would be unable to stand. At 5 times their bones would begin to crack. At 7 times they would be crushed flat. Sam sat calmly in the center of the chamber as the gravity reached 10 times Earth normal. His breathing was labored and sweat poured down his face, but he remained conscious and alert. "This reminds me of the training simulators we used in the Navy," he said through gritted teeth. "Except those were designed to make us pass out, not kill us." Pete Johnson took the third test, which involved exposure to atmospheric pressure equivalent to being at the bottom of an ocean. He had been a deep-sea diver before joining the space program, so he found the experience almost relaxing. "The pressure's not too bad," he said over the communication system. "It's actually quieter in here than it was on my last submarine deployment." By the end of the day, Kethvar and his research team looked like they had seen ghosts. Every test that should have killed the humans had instead been treated like a minor inconvenience. "This is impossible," Kethvar muttered to his assistants. "No natural species could survive these conditions." Amy overheard him and smiled. "You haven't seen anything yet. Wait until you learn about our immune systems." As they prepared to return to the Dakota, Sam turned to Pete. "I think we might have just made them more suspicious instead of less." Pete nodded. "Yeah, but at least now they know we're not lying about being tough." Amy wasn't so sure that was a good thing. The look in Kethvar's eyes suggested that their demonstration of human resilience had raised more questions than it had answered, and she had a feeling that the Zilani were going to keep testing until they found answers, no matter how dangerous those tests became. General Thekmore paced across the command deck of his warship like a caged predator. His forearms moved in agitation as he studied the reports from High Researcher Kethvar. The humans had survived every test that should have killed them, and now his military advisors were demanding answers. "Sir," said his aide, Captain Zelka, "the Science Division believes these humans might be biomechanical constructs designed for warfare. Their resistance to damage is beyond what any natural species should possess." Thekmore stopped pacing and turned his black eyes toward the view screen showing the human ship Dakota. "Then we will test them the way we test all potential warriors. Combat will reveal their true nature." He activated the communication system to contact the human vessel. Captain Morrison's face appeared on screen, looking calm but wary. "General Thekmore," Jake said, "I understand you wish to speak with us." "Indeed," Thekmore replied. "Your people have impressed our scientists with their durability. Now I wish to test their combat capabilities through our traditional warrior games. It is a great honor that we offer to few species." Jake looked suspicious. "What exactly do these games involve?" "Trials of strength, endurance, and pain tolerance that separate true warriors from pretenders. If your people are as resilient as they claim, they should find these contests merely challenging rather than impossible." Before Jake could respond, a voice came from off-screen. "Captain, I volunteer." Rick Hayes stepped into view of the camera. The former Navy SEAL had been quiet during most of the diplomatic meetings, but his eyes showed the kind of calm intensity that came from years of dangerous missions. "Rick, we don't know what these contests involve," Jake said. Rick shrugged. "Sir, I've been through Hell Week, SEER training, and 3 combat deployments. If these aliens want to test human toughness, I'm probably the right person for the job. General." Thekmore studied the human warrior through the screen. Rick Hayes was smaller than most Zilani fighters, but something in his posture suggested he was not someone to underestimate. "Very well," Thekmore said, "but our traditions require 3 contestants. Choose 2 others." Jake was about to object when Beth Turner spoke up from behind Rick. "I'll go." The former Olympic marathon runner had joined the space program because she wanted to push human limits in new environments. "I've spent my whole life testing how much punishment the human body can take." Dr. Amy Collins surprised everyone by stepping forward as well. "And I'll be the 3rd. Someone needs to document these trials from a scientific perspective." "Amy, you're not a warrior," Jake protested. "No," she agreed, "but I'm stubborn, and I've survived enough dangerous research expeditions to know how to endure pain for the sake of knowledge." 2 hours later, the 3 humans found themselves in a massive arena aboard the Zilani command ship. The walls were covered with weapons and devices that looked designed to cause maximum suffering. Zilani warriors filled the viewing areas, their black eyes focused on the small humans who had dared to accept their challenge. "The first trial is the crushing test," announced General Thekmore from his elevated platform. "You will be placed under increasing pressure until you surrender or die. Most warriors last less than 5 minutes. Rick Hayes was led to a device that looked like a hydraulic press designed by someone with a cruel imagination. Metal plates began to close around him, squeezing with force that would crush normal bones to powder. "This is interesting," Rick said through gritted teeth as the pressure increased. "It reminds me of being trapped under a collapsed building in Afghanistan, except that lasted for 6 hours." The pressure continued to build. Rick's face showed pain, but he remained conscious and alert. His SEAL training had taught him to compartmentalize pain, to separate his mind from what was happening to his body. "Sir," one of the Zilani technicians reported to Techmore, "the pressure has exceeded our safety limits. This should have killed him 3 times over." "Then increase it further," Techmore commanded. After 20 minutes, Rick was still conscious. His body was clearly suffering, but he managed to speak. "Is this supposed to get harder? Because I've had worse massages." The Zilani warriors began to murmur among themselves. This small human was enduring forces that would flatten their strongest champions. Beth Turner faced the second trial, called the Firewalk. She had to cross a path of metal, heated to temperatures that would melt most organic materials. The Zilani expected her to make it perhaps halfway before the pain became unbearable. Beth approached the glowing metal with the same mental preparation she used for marathons. Pain was just another obstacle to overcome through willpower and proper breathing techniques. "The key is not to fight the pain," she said to herself as she stepped onto the burning metal. "Just accept it and keep moving forward." Her feet began to burn immediately, but Beth had spent years training her mind to ignore physical discomfort. She walked slowly but steadily across the entire length of the heated path, her face showing concentration rather than agony. "That was like running a marathon on hot asphalt in the summer," she said when she reached the end. "Unpleasant, but manageable if you pace yourself properly." Dr. Amy Collins faced the third trial, known as the poison chamber. She was locked in a room filled with toxic gases that would kill most life forms within minutes. The test was designed to measure how long someone could survive before their organs shut down. Amy approached the challenge like a research problem. She controlled her breathing to minimize toxin intake and used meditation techniques to slow her heart rate and reduce the poison circulation through her system. "Fascinating," she said into her recorder as the gases swirled around her. "The chemical composition is similar to volcanic emissions I've studied on Earth. The trick is managing your exposure rate." She lasted 3 hours in conditions that should have killed her in 5 minutes. When they finally opened the chamber, she was still taking notes on the effects of the various toxins. General Techmore stood in stunned silence as his medical team examined the 3 humans. All of them were injured but functional. More importantly, none of them seemed to consider their performance unusual or remarkable. "That was a good warm-up," Rick said as the medics treated his compressed bones. "Do you have anything more challenging?" Beth was stretching her burned feet like she was cooling down after a training run. The temperature control could use some work, but overall it was a decent workout. Amy was comparing her toxin exposure data with her previous research. "I'm curious about the long-term effects of some of those compounds. Would it be possible to run the test again with different chemical combinations?" The Zilani warriors who had watched the trials began to back away from the humans. Several requested transfers to different ships rather than serve alongside creatures that seemed immune to pain and death. General Techmore realized that his tests had not revealed the humans to be artificial constructs. Instead, they had demonstrated that these small, fragile-looking beings possessed a level of natural toughness that exceeded anything in Zilani experience. "What kind of world creates beings like you?" he asked Amy as she continued her scientific observations. Amy looked up from her notes and smiled. "Earth. And honestly, General, we're not even the toughest species that evolved there. You should see what a honey badger can survive." Techmore made a mental note to never visit the human homeworld. If these 3 were examples of average human resilience, he did not want to encounter their elite warriors. As the humans prepared to return to their ship, Rick turned to Beth and Amy. "I think we might have just made them more afraid of us instead of more impressed." Beth nodded. "Yeah, but at least now they know we're not pretending to be tough." Amy was still taking notes. "I'm more concerned about what they'll try next. Each test has been more extreme than the last." None of them realized that General Techmore was already planning trials that would push human endurance beyond anything they had yet experienced. High Researcher Kethvar stood before the Emergency Council of the Zilani Empire, his usually steady voice shaking with disbelief. The Great Hall was filled with military commanders, scientists, and political leaders, all trying to make sense of the impossible data before them. The humans have survived every test we have designed, Kethvar reported. Radiation that sterilizes our equipment, pressure that would crush our strongest warriors, temperatures that melt metal, and toxic gases that kill on contact. They not only survive, but continue to function normally. General Techmore slammed his armored fist on the council table. There must be limits to their endurance. No species can be truly invincible. Perhaps, said Councillor Vexara, the eldest member of the ruling body. But what if we are asking the wrong questions? What if these humans are not artificially enhanced, but naturally evolved to survive conditions that would destroy us? Council murmured uneasily. The idea that a species could naturally evolve such extreme durability challenged everything they understood about biology and evolution. I propose one final test, Kethvar said quietly. We will combine all previous stressors simultaneously and increase them beyond anything we have ever attempted. If the humans are truly natural, this will reveal their breaking point. If they are artificial, it may damage their systems enough to expose their true nature. General Techmore nodded grimly. And if they survive? Then we will know we face something unprecedented in the galaxy. Tony Mitchell had volunteered for what everyone was calling the ultimate test. The former firefighter from Detroit had spent 15 years running into burning buildings while everyone else ran out. He had pulled people from collapsed structures, fought through smoke and flames, and survived situations that killed other rescue workers. You sure about this, Tony? Captain Morrison asked over the communication link. The Zilani are talking about conditions that exceed anything they've ever tested before. Tony adjusted his environmental suit and checked his equipment one more time. Captain, I've been in situations where I didn't expect to come out alive. The difference is this time I'm choosing to go in. That makes it easier, not harder. Doctor, Amy Collins was monitoring from the observation deck of the Zilani Research Facility. Tony, we're reading atmospheric pressure equivalent to being 3 miles underwater, temperature fluctuations from -200 to +800 degrees, radiation levels that would kill most life instantly, and toxic gas concentrations that should dissolve organic tissue. Got it, Doc, Tony replied calmly. Sounds like a Tuesday morning in downtown Detroit. The test chamber was a sphere of metal and crystal that looked more like a weapon than a scientific instrument. Energy conduits ran along its surface, pulsing with power that made the air around it shimmer. Inside, monitoring equipment registered conditions that should not be survivable by any known form of life. Tony walked into the chamber like he was heading into another burning building. The door sealed behind him with a sound like a tomb closing. Immediately, every system activated at once. The pressure slammed into him like being hit by a truck. The temperature began to swing wildly, freezing his breath one moment and making his skin burn the next. Radiation washed over him in waves that should have torn apart his DNA. Gases swirled around him that would eat through metal. Readings are off the charts, reported one of Kethvar's assistants. No biological organism should be conscious right now. Tony's voice came through the communication system, strained but clear. Well, this is definitely worse than that warehouse fire on 8 Mile, the one where the roof collapsed and the chemicals started exploding. He was in pain, real, overwhelming pain that made every nerve in his body scream. But Tony had learned long ago that pain was just information. It told you that you were hurt, but it didn't tell you to quit. That decision came from somewhere else entirely. The human's vital signs are stressed but stable, Amy reported, watching her instruments in amazement. His heart rate is elevated, but he's not going into shock. How is this possible? Kethvar whispered. Tony had found his rhythm now, the same mental state that had carried him through hundreds of rescues. He separated his mind from his body, focusing on breathing and staying conscious. The key was not to fight the pain, but to accept it and continue functioning despite it. You know what this reminds me of? Tony said, his voice getting stronger rather than weaker. That time I was trapped in a basement with a family during a house fire. Temperature was over 600 degrees, smoke so thick you couldn't see your hand, and the floor was about to collapse. Spent 4 hours digging through debris with my bare hands. The Zalani technicians looked at their instruments in disbelief. The conditions in the chamber should have killed Tony Mitchell within the first minute. Instead, he had been inside for over an hour and was still talking. Did he just say he spent 4 hours in 600-degree temperatures? General Thekmore asked. That's what he said, Amy confirmed. And knowing Tony, he's probably understating how bad it was. Inside the chamber, Tony was starting to feel almost comfortable. The pain was still there, but he had found ways to work around it. His firefighting experience had taught him to function in impossible conditions, and his natural stubbornness refused to let alien machines beat him. Hey, Doc, he called out. How much longer is this test supposed to run? Because I've got a poker game tonight and I don't want to be late. The joke hit the Zalani observers like a physical blow. This human was not just surviving conditions that should destroy him. He was making conversation and worrying about social obligations. After 3 hours, Kethvar finally ordered the test stopped. Not because Tony was failing, but because the equipment was beginning to overload from running at maximum capacity for so long. When the chamber opened, Tony walked out under his own power. His environmental suit was damaged. His face was flushed from heat and radiation, and he was clearly exhausted. But he was alive, conscious, and alert. That was intense, he said, accepting a water bottle from Amy. Definitely a 10 out of 10 on the unpleasant scale. Right up there with that chemical plant explosion in '97. The Zalani medical team examined him with instruments that registered impossible readings. His body showed damage from every type of stress they had applied, but nothing that wouldn't heal with time and proper treatment. I don't understand, Kethvar said to Amy. The conditions in that chamber should have broken down the molecular bonds in his body. How is he still functional? Amy thought about how to explain human evolution to an alien species. Our homeworld is not a gentle place, she said finally. For millions of years, only the toughest humans survived to have children. We're the descendants of people who lived through ice ages, plagues, natural disasters, and constant warfare. Survival isn't just what we do, it's what we are. That night, the Zalani High Council met in emergency session. The debate raged for hours about what the humans represented and how the Empire should respond. They could be valuable allies, argued Councillor Vexara. Beings who can survive anything would be useful for exploring dangerous regions of space. Or they could be a threat to our dominance, General Thekmore countered. If humans are this, resilient naturally, what might they become with our technology? High researcher Kethvar listened to the arguments and thought about Tony Mitchell making jokes while enduring conditions that should have vaporized him. Perhaps, he said quietly, the question is not whether they are a threat, but whether we can afford to make enemies of beings who consider our deadliest weapons to be merely unpleasant. The council fell silent as they considered the implications. They had sought to test human limits and instead had discovered that those limits might not exist in any meaningful sense. In his quarters aboard the Dakota, Tony Mitchell was telling the story of his test to anyone who would listen. So there I was, getting cooked, frozen, irradiated, and poisoned all at the same time, and all I could think about was whether I remembered to feed my cat before we left Earth. The other humans laughed, but Captain Morrison noticed something in their eyes that hadn't been there before. They were beginning to realize that their casual attitude toward survival might be more remarkable than they had ever imagined. The Zalani war fleet hung in space like a swarm of silver daggers, their weapons charged and ready to fire. General Thekmore stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the small human vessel through the main screen. The order to attack was already prepared, waiting only for his word. Sir, reported his tactical officer, all ships are in position. We can destroy the human vessel in seconds. Thekmore nodded slowly. The council had decided that humans were too dangerous to allow. Into the galaxy, a species that could survive anything might eventually become unstoppable. Better to eliminate them now while they were still few in number. General, wait, came a voice from behind him. High Researcher Kethvar hurried onto the bridge, carrying a data pad and looking more excited than afraid. I request permission to speak with the humans one final time. For what purpose? Thekmor asked. We have already decided their fate. Please, just give me 1 hour. I believe I understand what we are dealing with, and if I am correct, destroying them would be the greatest mistake in Zilani history. Thekmor looked at the research data Kethvar was showing him. Very well. 1 hour. But if your explanation does not satisfy the Council, we proceed with the attack. Aboard the Dakota, Captain Morrison was preparing his crew for what looked like their final battle. The Zilani fleet had them completely surrounded, and there was no chance of escape. But he was determined to go down fighting. Captain, Lisa, Parker called from the communication station. The Zilani are requesting one final meeting, just Dr. Collins and the High Researcher. Jake looked skeptical. It could be a trap. Amy Collins was already putting on her diplomatic gear. Jake, if they wanted to kill us, they would have done it already. Maybe this is our chance to make them understand. An hour later, Amy found herself in the same council chamber where this had all began. But now the atmosphere was different. Instead of arrogance and certainty, she sensed confusion and something that might have been fear. High Researcher Kethvar stood before the assembled council, his data displayed on screens around the chamber. Honored council members, he began. I believe we have been asking the wrong questions about the humans. We assumed they were either artificial constructs or naturally weak beings pretending to be strong. We never considered a third possibility. Which is, asked Counselor Vexara, that they are exactly what they claim to be. A naturally evolved species from a world so hostile that surviving it required the kind of resilience we have witnessed. Amy stepped forward. If I may, I would like to tell you about Earth. The council chamber fell silent. Amy took a deep breath and began to speak. Our planet has tried to kill us for millions of years, she said simply. Every few thousand years, massive sheets of ice cover most of the land, forcing our ancestors to survive in conditions colder than your homeworld's winter. Volcanoes explode with the force of nuclear weapons, filling the air with poison gas and ash that blocks out the sun for years. The Zilani Council members exchanged glances. These conditions sounded like the worst disasters in their recorded history, yet the humans spoke of them as routine events. Diseases sweep across our world, killing most of the population, Amy continued. Earthquakes split the ground open and swallow entire cities. Storms with winds that move faster than your aircraft tear apart everything in their path. The very air and water are filled with organisms trying to eat us from the inside. General, Thekmor leaned forward. And humans survived all of this? Not just survived, Amy said. We thrived. Because Earth didn't just try to kill us with disasters. It filled itself with predators designed to hunt us. Giant cats with teeth like knives. Bears that weigh as much as your vehicles. Snakes with poison that stops your heart in seconds. Tiny insects that carry diseases worse than any biological weapon. She pulled up images on her datapad, showing Earth's most dangerous creatures. The Zilani Council stared in horror at pictures of great white sharks, saltwater crocodiles, and polar bears. But the deadliest predator on Earth, Amy said quietly, was other humans. We spent thousands of years fighting wars against each other, developing weapons and tactics designed to kill the one species we knew could survive anything else our world threw at us. Kethvar nodded. This explains their resistance to our tests. They come from a world where surviving the impossible is simply normal life. Every human alive today, Amy continued, is descended from people who survived ice ages, plagues, natural disasters, predator attacks, and constant warfare. We didn't evolve to be comfortable. We evolved to endure. Counselor Vexara spoke slowly. You are saying that what we consider extreme survival conditions are merely everyday challenges on your homeworld? Amy smiled sadly. The tests you put us through reminded Tony of his job as a firefighter. Rick compared them to military training. He did for fun. Beth thought they were like exercise routines. To us, your deadliest challenges felt like a rough day at work. The council chamber was completely silent. Amy could see the implications dawning on their faces. They had not been testing superweapons or artificial beings. They had been testing the products of natural selection so harsh it would have driven most species extinct. "But here's what you need to understand," Amy said, her voice growing stronger. "The same evolution that made us tough also made us cooperative. On a world where everything wants to kill you, the only way to survive is to work together. Humans don't conquer other species, we make friends with them." She gestured to her datapad, showing images of humans with their domestic animals. "We took wolves, the most dangerous predators in our environment, and turned them into loyal companions. We allied with horses for transportation, cattle for food, and even cats for pest control. When we find other intelligent life, our first instinct is not to dominate but to cooperate." General Techmore looked troubled. "But if humans are this resilient, they could become a threat to our empire." "Only if you make us one," Amy replied. "We came here in peace, seeking friendship. Every test you've put us through has been met with curiosity and good humor, not aggression. We want to explore the galaxy together, not fight over it." "High Researcher." Kethavar stepped forward. "Honored Council, I propose that instead of viewing humans as a threat, we consider them as the perfect allies. Think of the worlds we could explore together, the dangers we could face with beings who consider impossibility a minor inconvenience." Counselor Vexara was quiet for a long moment. "You are suggesting an alliance with a species whose idea of relaxation involves conditions that would kill our warriors?" "I'm suggesting an alliance with a species that has spent millions of years learning to survive together," Amy said. "We're not interested in conquering anyone. We're interested in exploring, learning, and helping each other face whatever the universe throws at us." The council debate lasted for hours. Amy waited patiently, answering questions about human culture, biology, and history. Gradually, she watched fear turn into curiosity, and suspicion turn into something that might become respect. Finally, Counselor, Vexara spoke. "Dr. Collins, would your people be willing to consider a formal alliance with the Zilani Empire? Not as subjects or conquerors, but as equal partners in exploration?" Amy smiled. "I think Captain Morrison would be very interested in discussing that possibility." When the council session ended, Amy found herself walking back to the shuttle with High Researcher Kethvar. "Thank you for giving us a chance to explain," she said. Kethvar looked thoughtful. "I must ask, Dr. Collins, if humans are so naturally resilient, what do you consider truly dangerous?" Amy thought about it for a moment. "Running out of coffee," she said seriously. "That's when humans get really dangerous." As the Zilani fleet powered down their weapons and began forming an escort formation around the Dakota, Captain Morrison received a message that would change the course of galactic history. "Captain Morrison," came General Techmore's voice over the communication system, "the Zilani Empire formally requests to negotiate a treaty of alliance and mutual exploration with the human species. We believe that together we can face challenges that neither of our peoples could handle alone." Jake looked around his bridge at the crew members who had survived impossible tests and made friends with aliens by refusing to die. "General Techmore," he replied, "I think that sounds like the beginning of a beautiful friendship." 3 months later, the first joint human-Zilani exploration mission launched toward the galactic core, ready to face whatever dangers awaited them. The mission logs would later note that the greatest challenge they encountered was keeping the humans from volunteering for every dangerous assignment, because they found the life-threatening conditions interesting and educational. The galaxy would never be the same.